Welcome to Coastal Voices, the show that brings you stories about life on Hatteras Island. This is Susan West, your host for the evening. The stories you'll hear tonight capture the spirit of people from Rodanthe to Hatteras Village. The storytellers come from all walks of life, and topics include everything from childhood memories to fish tales, community traditions to big storms, hard work to daring adventures. The stories are from recordings collected by local volunteers in the Coastal Voices Oral History Project. You'll meet some of those volunteers in the show tonight. To learn more about the project, please visit our website at carolinacoastalvoices.com. Micah Daniels of Wanchese talks about Wanchese Fish Company, the business started by her family, in an interview with Susan West. You mentioned your dad came from a large family?
Yes. My father is from, his parents were Malcolm and Maud Daniels. They had 15 biological children, 11 boys and 4 girls. 1 through 11 were all boys, with the exception of number 7, who was a girl. She's an amazing cook, if you could believe that. My father was born in his house in Wanchese. He was number 5 out of the 15 children, and soon after they told his mother that she would have to go to the doctor to have the children, but the first 5 or 6 she had in her house in Wanchese.
Do you remember your grandparents? Were they?
Not vaguely, I don't have many memories of my grandfather. He passed away in 1986. Okay. And my grandmother, I knew more. However, I'm one of 55 plus grandchildren, and
oh my goodness,
there's so many grandchildren, so it's hard to, have this real personal relationship when there's 50 some of you. But I was raised in the, she and my grandfather helped found the Wanchese Assembly of God Church. And what's really interesting about my grandmother is that she was an Etheridge, and her brother is Willie Etheridge. And they and their father founded Etheridge Seafood. Okay. Or really, he founded Wanchese Fish Company in 1936. And he had 2 children, Maud and they call him, and Will. They call him Uncle Who. There was Papa Will was the man who founded it. Then there's Uncle Will that was Maud's brother that everybody called Uncle Junior.
And was he the person that I knew as Captain Will?
Yes. Our relationship with the Etheridges, they're our first cousins. So okay. Maud married Malcolm, and then in 1948, he took over Wanchese Fish Company. So we say, it was founded in 1936, but not by a Daniels. It was founded by an Etheridge. Okay. Then my grandfather purchased it, or however that worked, in 1940. I don't know all the details. I think he bought it, but so that's how the Daniels family acquired Wanchese Fish Company. Okay. But then the Etheridges, like Captain Will, her brother, started Etheridge Seafood. So they're our first cousins, and he had 4 children. So Willie Etheridge had 4 children, and then my dad's family had 15 children. But they were a workforce. Like my dad and his brothers, and they worked. They were allowed to go to church, and they were allowed to go to school. And then they worked. And they worked before school. They got out of school early and came home and worked. But when I got off track when I mentioned that they were members of the Wanchese Assembly of God Church, because it originally started in the Etheridge Seafood on fish boxes. In the Wanchese Fish Company. Yeah, they used to hold revival. Yes, and this is fascinating, and we should ask somebody about it who was around, but they were falling out on fish boxes, and that's what they sat on Sundays, and eventually they built the brick church that you see now. But my grandparents were pillars in that church, and so I knew my grandmother through church, and And they say she was quiet, and I really don't ever remember her saying that much. However, you've got to have, she had some backbone to raise 15 kids.
In an interview with Liz Browning Fox, Beverly Bull of Frisco recalls moving to Hatteras Island in 1971 to surf.
Tell us about how you originally came down here.
I lived in Ocean City, Maryland. A friend came by and said, "You have the next 2 days off?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Let's go to Hatteras." So we came down here and went surfing, and we both fell in love with it and got a job at the Channel Bass for the next year. I had friends living in Avon, supposedly. Of course, back then no one had phones. Cell phones weren't even thought of.
This was about what year?
This was 71, and my friends had lived here in the winter and couldn't handle it and left. And I thought I was going to live with my surfing buddies, and I sold my bicycle, I sold my surfboard, I sold my car, and I had a trunk, and came to Hatteras. I got some lifeguards to bring me down who wanted to surf here. So I got down here and had no place to stay, so they stayed a few days. And somebody at the Channel Bass hooked me up with Mrs. Newsom, who owned the rooming and apartments.
That would have been Willie Newsom's widow?
Oh, I don't know. She was a widow.
Mm-hmm.
She had a son named Terry. And so not only did they fix me up with a place to live, but with actually a local girl named Jean, and we shared an apartment there, and Jean was Native American. And we shared an apartment for a while, and
This was at the Beacon?
at the Beacon. There were, let's say, 5 little teeny tiny apartments. It was neat living there, of course, because in those years Hatteras was the place, and I could walk every place and come up to the beach, just stick out your thumb. And next door was a pool hall, George's Pool Hall.
Now, is that in the building that is now Roads and Gallery?
This guy George ran it. He wasn't a local, came from across the Sound. And one of my friends from Ocean City made me a surfboard and brought it down. And George didn't like that I had guys in my apartment. And next thing we know, we hear a shotgun go off. My friend George ran out to his van and said, "I'm getting out of here." And I never saw him again. And by that time I was getting kind of aggravated with George and moved into a little dumpy trailer that was on the other side of the pool hall there. But it was neat because everybody there was friends. You of course didn't have air conditioning, so all your windows were open, doors were open. Sometimes we all ate together, put all the tables in the middle of the hall, and we'd all eat together and stuff. And of course across the street, north of the Atlantic View Motel was nothing but a field. So you could walk over there and go to the beach very easily, and it was just...
Sounds like a good place to be.
It was great. Just a little travel trailer my friend and I lived in. And it had the bathtub drain cut so that it just drained out on the ground. Sometimes you got in the shower with tree frogs. One time there was a snake. The thing that got us to move out was a rat.
25-year-old Shannon Dunn of Buxton talks about the first time she took her fishing boat around Diamond Shoals in an interview with Susan West. Do you ever spend the night on the boat now?
I only did it once this summer for Spanish mackerel to go to the North Beach because, I don't know, they went over there and my dad was like, don't, because I'm by myself. He doesn't want me going over there by myself. And he's like, no, don't go over there. You'll catch them over here. And then they started whacking them on the North Beach, and it was like 2 days in a row.
Why did your dad not want you to go
Because you
there?
have to go around the shoals.
Did you?
So one afternoon I got in and I told him I was going to go stay the night. He always thinks I'm joking, but when I say I'm going to do something, I always do it. But And so I got in one afternoon from fishing after they were whacking them on the North Beach, and I was listening to him on the radio. And I came in and I called my mom and I was like, Mom, bring me some food. I'm staying the night. I'm going to go stay the night. I'm going to go over the North Beach, fish this afternoon and stay the night and fish all day tomorrow. And so I came in and my dad's like, you're not going. And I was like, yes, I am. But anyways, he couldn't talk me out of it because, well, he was going to talk me out of it if there was no one else staying the night. But I actually talked to people on the radio that were going to stay the night, to Parker and Benny. And so I went over to the North Beach that afternoon. And it was pretty choppy over there, and the boat's kind of small. I wouldn't have hardly slept at all in that. So I went and just jumped around and went and stayed the night in the cove. And then woke up and went over the shoals in the morning.
Was that the first time you'd taken the boat across the shoals?
Mm-hmm.
Was that scary?
Going over it was fun, and the day before it was fine, but the next day coming back over, it was like a really freak swell that came in, and I don't remember Rob. You remember Rob talking about it that day? We were all on North Beach, and there's just like this random swell that hit all of a sudden, like head high. My mom calls me. She's like, Shannon, are you still out there? It's head high. The waves are good. Like overhead, actually. I think it was overhead. And it wasn't calling for that. And so I had to go back over the shoals, and I was like, oh crap. And I followed Attitude, and Devo was behind me, and I like see Attitude in front of me. There's like this little, instead of going way around the shoals, there's a little cut you can take. And I was following Attitude, and there was like chest high like waves like all around me, like one behind me, one to my right, one to my left, and one in front of me. And I was trying to like stay, like I gunned it and tried to stay like on the back of one wave, and could barely see Attitude in front of me. And Devo stopped. Devo saw, and I guess my dad talked to him later. He said the whole, like right when he was about to follow me, the whole entire thing closed up. So Devo went and took a different way.
Oh, gee.
But.
So, isn't that frightening, or is it a rush?
I guess it's a rush.
Yeah.
It's just like, please don't let me lose the boat.
In 1971, George Pratt describes his first fishing experience in Buxton, one of the villages on Hatteras Island. He was interviewed by Sandy Jones Garrison on June 16, 2014.
My first trip to Hatteras was in 1971. A colleague of mine that I taught with had just started teaching at Georgia Southern University. And we both liked to fish, and we got into a conversation, and he said, I think we ought to go to Hatteras over Christmas break. He said, it's a wonderful place if you like to fish and go. And so he convinced me we should go. And we got in a car and came up here for a 3-day visit. And we came to Buxton. We stayed at Edgar Hooper's hotel right as you come into Buxton from the north. At that time, it was just a group of little cabins. They weren't as big as they are nowadays. And we stayed with Edgar. And I remember first day, I'd bought one fishing pole, one fishing reel, and about 3 lures. I was not really prepared, but we drove out to what's now Ramp 44 and walked across the beach and walked out to the point. We didn't have 4-wheel drive in those days. And my first experience was walking over the dune into the fog and seeing birds come out of the fog and then go disappear back into the fog in a circular pattern. And I went out there and started casting one of my lures and caught 4 15 to 20 pound bluefish. And that was my first experience, and I was hooked from that point. We picked up our fish and walked up and down the beach. I remember that day too, because those fish got heavy towards the end of the day. But Ray Couch, who owned the Red Drum service station and tackle shop at that time, had driven out and was checking, and he brought us in. Very nice
Was that the first time you had met Mr. Couch?
First time I'd met Mr. Couch.
Did he do that routinely? Drive out and pick up stray fishermen?
Not
Did he
routinely,
do
but
that?
it was very nice. Edgar Hooper would do it for his guests every now and then. He would just ride out to check, because there weren't very many people staying here at that time. And he would drive out, and you'd see Mr. Connors, who owned Connors grocery store at the time. He would drive out occasionally, smoking his pipe. You'd see him coming out, and he'd oftentimes offer people like us a ride in. It wasn't too many years. I think 2 years later, we eventually got a four-wheel drive vehicle to bring up.
Teresa Ray of Ocracoke talks about landing her job as a commercial fisherman. When you moved to Ocracoke, did you start fishing right away?
No, I was still doing massage,
Okay.
and I was working with some women here in a retail store, Mermaid's Folly, and my captain, Hardy Plyler, which was Byron's captain, Byron left, and he was left without, some help, and I was left with, just being tired of working in a retail shop, and,
Sure.
I was, I've always liked physical labor. I've always been a tomboy. I like hanging outside and getting my hands dirty, looking at animals, and so I was like, hey man, if you don't mind hiring a woman, don't treat me like a woman, treat me like anybody else you'd have work for you, and, he was willing to give me a test run, and it
But
worked out well.
you had never done
Never
any
done anything
commercial
like
fishing?
No commercial fishing. Now I've hunted, for a good portion.
Uh-huh.
So I've always been,
Tell me, how did that work out with Hardy at the beginning? Or was it overwhelming?
It was.
Oh, and you're pound netting, right?
Oh, we pound net, gill net.
Okay,
Yes.
both.
We
Okay.
started out, Hardy was working with another fisherman, Jesse Spencer, and that was their pound net crew. They had several nets, a stand of nets together, and I was just on the side to help with restaurant, cleaning fish for some of the restaurants here.
Okay.
We cater to about 4 of them.
Okay.
And so I was pretty much brought on to hang net, clean fish, and manage the books for the fish that we sell to the restaurants, and
Okay.
help him fish while he
For
was off
the-
doing pound netting.
The
So no, that was just all for Hardy, and then he started introducing me. He'd be like, "Okay, we're gonna go out and start pound netting, and you can, do something, just make yourself useful." And I just really enjoyed it, and
so it was the 3 of you.
yes, it was the
Okay.
3 of us. It was mainly Hardy and Jesse, but I was
Uh-huh.
just there to kind of learn the ropes and
As
get
an
a feel
apprentice,
of it. Yes,
sort of.
Yes,
Uh-huh.
very much. And then they split. So Jesse wanted more nets, and Hardy, he's an older dude, and it was getting harder for him. And now we just have 1 pound net, but it was just. It just, everything would just come together, and I would, I'm a fairly quick learner, and I keep my eyes open and my mouth shut. I do what I'm told, and that's, you go a long way by keeping your mouth shut. It's taken me years to learn that, but you can do that. And so it worked out.
Can you think of anything that would have made it easier for you when you first got into fishing?
Other than weightlifting, no, because everything was so new to me. Didn't even know how to start a boat. I didn't know how to do any of that. The first 2 years it was kind of, don't ask what you're being told to do. You just figure out how to do it right as quickly as possible and try to get it done right the first time.
Okay.
And then by the 3rd, 4th year, he would, go through and, I'd try not to ask too many questions, because that gets annoying after a while. But he would be like, this is why you do this. These are the reasons for this. And you kind of start to put it all together by the 4th year. So it's just, there's nothing I think that could have really helped me.
Okay.
I was just myself, I had grown up with boys, and, I was tough enough, and,
So you haven't fished any other place?
no. Cane pole in Missouri somewhere. That's about all the fishing I ever did.
Sharon Peel Kennedy of Buxton talks about her church, Our Lady of the Seas Catholic Church.
I'm the only native, born, raised, blood kin native on Hatteras Island that sits in that church. And my grandmother, Paula, is who named our church, Our Ladies of the Seas. She held the very first Catholic masses on Hatteras Island in her living room.
Now, wait a minute. This is on your mother's side.
Yes. Oh,
Okay.
God, yes.
Okay.
Oh, my dad's mother was a devout Methodist.
Okay.
Oh, heavens, yes.
Okay.
But
your mom's family.
My mother's mother was a Catholic, but her husband was a Pentecost preacher.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a preacher at the Lighthouse Assembly of God Church, as a matter of fact. And a barber on Hatteras.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But his wife was Catholic.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you grew up Catholic.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But that was very controversial. Like I said, she held the first Catholic Mass in her living room using an ironing board as the altar.
Wow.
That the priest would come all the way from Elizabeth City to hold Mass on Saturdays.
Oh my
And there was
goodness.
Willie Foster's mother, Miss Jean Foster. I don't think she was quite here yet, but she was one of the original Catholic ladies who wasn't even from here. She was from New York herself.
Okay.
Miss Jean. Carol Dillon's husband, Bill Dillon, he was Catholic, but she's Methodist. That was it. There was no other Catholic families here. Okay. Willie Foster, the Dillon girls, and my family were the only blood natives of Catholics here. It was very controversial because we went to church on Saturdays, number one. We were Catholics, and everybody else was Pentecost and Methodist. I don't even remember a Baptist being here back then.
Okay. So do you remember Mass at
Yeah,
your grandmother's
yes.
house?
No. They went. That was just a short while. Then they went over to the Navy base. The Navy base had a movie theater, and they held them in there.
Okay.
And it was even packed then. Even then, I probably remember church when I was I remember going to first grade, so I remember being at church by, 5 or 6 years old. Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, in the summers, it was packed from vacationers, because from the north people would come to church.
Right.
And I mean, there were people out the door, standing room only. It was amazing.
And so your grandmother helped select the name?
She's the one who named it Our Ladies of the Sea. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And I went there. We had nuns that would come down to give us our catechism classes. And we were quite controversial, believe you me. But it was quite a privilege to do it, because I went to the other churches too. Like, we used to go to Christmas Eve at the Methodist Church in Hatteras, and I had speeches that I would say then as a kid, and I went to the vacation Bible schools there. I'd go to the Assembly of God Church with where my grandfather was, and just sit into Our Ladies of the Seas now on any given Sunday, to where it's standing room only. Every seat is taken. It's people from all over this country, from all over this world, on a Sunday morning with their brood of kids all dressed, ready for church, is awesome, because they're taking their time out of a vacation, get up to come to church with everybody all in glee. What a right place to be.
Gail Quigley Scarborough of Frisco shares the secret to building a pound net in an interview with Susan West.
There's an art to it. It's cutting it out. And my husband would show me, but he never stopped and explained, the full process. And actually, I was telling him about it. I told him, well, I can patch a net, but I don't know about. And he said, you don't?
Mr. R.E. Spencer. I said, you don't know? I said, yeah, I watch him. He's cutting here, cutting here, cutting here, and going down this way, this way, this way, and he puts it all back. And he said, well, honey, and I remember him telling me this, well, honey, there's only one thing you have to remember. I said, what's that? He said, you start on a flat, but you can't cut any more flats.
What does that mean?
If you have a net, you can cut it this way and cut a piece of it off as a flat. But if you cut it as a point, you have to have something to tie tie it around. Okay, you can start at that flat.
Okay.
That's in the middle of that net. You start there. But everything else has to be a point. Don't matter, you can go from here to the sound, you're still going to have to cut points all the way. Okay. You can end up on a flat.
Okay.
You begin on a flat, you end up on a flat. But everything else, you have to make sure to cut a point because you have to have something to tie to. You can't tie to a flat.
Okay.
And as soon as he told me that, it made sense.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, maybe some people don't learn because no one ever told them how to do it. And he said, well, that's simple. I watched him and learned how to cut out a patch.
Okay.
You cut the patch out, except for the one you're going to make. You make one, so you cut it, like if you want it 12 by 12, you cut it 11 by 11.
Why? Why would
if you want to put a big patch of net in,
right.
Rather than if you had 3 or 4 little holes, you patch it. That I could see after he showed me, and I said, well, that was simple enough.
I understand you were a pretty good net hanger.
Well, that's just not. I mean, that's any woman could do that. Just knit.
Carol Midget of Waves talks about sea beans in an interview with John Griffin.
Sea beans, that's what we called them when I was a kid. They're different types. Some of them are darker than others, but they're called, what we always called them was sea beans. And we'd go days just looking for sea beans. I mean, they weren't that thick, but you don't see any of them anymore.
Really? And they were from Costa Rica?
Yeah, that's right. They're in a vine, and they break loose every now and then on the bottom of the ocean, I reckon. But you don't see, you see lookalikes now, but you don't see the real stuff.
Coastal Voices thanks the storytellers, the community oral historians, and Radio Hatteras for their support. And we thank you for joining us this evening. Good night.